For 40 grueling days, the sun has beaten down on the Valley of Elah with an oppressive weight. The two armies positioned along the rocky ridges have been locked in place, trapped in a stagnant temporal loop of heat and swirling dust. Stepping onto the valley floor is Goliath of Gath, an absolute anomaly of nature. His interlocking scale armor alone weighs more than a fully grown soldier, and the iron head of his massive spear defies standard military logistics entirely. When his roar originates from the valley floor, the tight rock walls act as an acoustic amplifier. Bouncing upward, his voice hits the Israelite ranks with the concussive force of a physical blow, ensuring the intimidation reaches every single veteran. The Philistines' strategy here relies entirely on this psychological deadlock. The objective is to completely break the enemy's collective will to fight before a single sword is ever drawn. The Israelite soldiers are seasoned warriors, highly trained for brutal hand-to-hand combat, yet they find themselves entirely immobilized, paralyzed along the ridge by a terror that eclipses their rigorous military training. Even King Saul remains utterly isolated, staying cloistered deep inside his royal tent, while the giant continues pacing the dirt below. There is a direct inverse correlation taking place. Every morning Meppa Champion emerges unchecked to issue his challenge. King Saul's earthly authority over his men visibly and measurably erodes. The true existential threat facing Israel is the systemic paralysis. A complete absence of hope has successfully infected their entire command structure. Far removed from the bitter realities of the front line, a young shepherd named David arrives at the sprawling military camp to deliver heavy provisions to his older brothers. He immediately steps into an atmosphere of cowering veterans. Looking at this split diagram, we see two entirely different ways to process the threat. On the left, the soldiers calculate the sheer mass of bronze armor and weaponry, yielding a mathematical impossibility for survival. But on the right, David views the exact same giant through a spiritual lens. He plots the mortal threat against an infinite vector field of divine authority, processing the giant's insults as active, loud blasphemy against the eternal creator. Processing the conflict through this infinite vector field triggers a sudden surge of righteous indignation in the young shepherd. It completely overrides his natural human instinct for self-preservation. His bold, questioning words quickly echo through the paralyzed camp. Word of his complete lack of fear travels fast, prompting a desperate royal summons directly to King Saul's tent. David cuts right through the 40-day cycle of fear, because he is operating under an entirely different set of operational realities than the rest of the seasoned army. Inside the royal tent, Saul attempts to impose conventional military logic onto the situation. He dresses the youth in his own heavy bronze royal armor, hoping to provide some meager chance of survival. David finds it completely impossible to walk or even breathe properly under the crushing weight of human-made defenses. He firmly strips off the unproven gear. He points out his history of surviving vicious wilderness predators to the king. His tested, reliable defense mechanism has always been absolute reliance on divine providence. Leaving the tent, he descends solitary toward the dry riverbed. Armed with a wooden staff and a leather sling, he kneels quietly by the cold, winding brook, carefully selecting 5 perfectly smooth stones. Shedding the royal armor is a physical manifestation of perfect faith. It shows a complete surrender of his own fragile life to the sovereign will of God. The two figures converge in the center of the silent valley. A towering fortress of hammered bronze and corded muscle stands directly opposite an unprotected youth. Watching the small figure approach, Goliath erupts in explosive rage. Deeply insulted by the lack of military respect, he curses the shepherd by his dark gods. David does not flinch or break his steady stride. His voice carries clearly across the silent expanse, publicly proclaiming that the impending outcome will definitively prove salvation does not rely on human weaponry. The giant charges forward, his heavy armored boots shaking the ground for a killing strike. David meets him with a fluid sprint, swinging his loaded leather sling in a rapid, blurring arc above his head. The leather snaps with a sharp crack. The release of the stone instantly transitions the conflict from a mathematically impossible human standoff into a flawless execution of divine justice. The projectile finds the single exposed gap in the heavy armor, striking Goliath squarely in the center of his forehead with a sickening crunch. All of the strength instantly evaporates from his imposing frame, sending his massive bulk crashing into the parched earth. David calmly walks up to the fallen champion. He draws the giant's own massive sword from its sheath and finishes the task, ensuring the victory is undeniable. An absolute stunned silence washes over the thousands of watching soldiers. The grueling 40-day psychological deadlock has been violently shattered in a matter of seconds. The impossible victory leaves a permanent mark on the Israelite camp. It cements a holy reverence in their ranks, proving unequivocally that divine sovereignty triumphs over overwhelming earthly terror.